The call came in the middle of a meeting, a quiet, trembling voice on the other end of the line. "Sir, please come home. Now. She'll destroy her." The Mafia boss, Lorenzo Moretti, had heard fear before. He knew the sound of lies, danger, betrayal. But this voice, his maid's voice, was shaking in a way that made his blood run cold. He arrived at the mansion in under 8 minutes. The moment he stepped through the doors, he knew something was wrong. No music, no footsteps, just the faint, muffled sound of crying. Not his wife's, his daughter's. Lorenzo moved down the hallway, one step at a time. The maid following behind him, hands shaking, trying to explain but unable to speak through the panic. And then he reached the living room. He froze. His elegant, perfectly composed wife, the woman he trusted with his home and his heart, was standing over their little girl, rage twisting across her face. His daughter was on the floor, trying to shield herself, tiny hands trembling, whispering for it to stop. Lorenzo had seen murders, betrayals, executions, but nothing prepared him for the sight of his wife hurting the one soul he would burn the world to protect. In that moment, he realized the enemy he'd been hunting on the streets had been living in his home all along. Stay with me until the end, because what Lorenzo does next will tear open secrets this family has been hiding for years. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Lorenzo Moretti wasn't just any businessman. He was the head of one of the most feared crime families in the city. Men crossed the street when they saw him coming. Police officers looked the other way when his name was mentioned. Politicians answered his calls on the first ring. But at home, he was just a father who loved his 8-year-old daughter more than life itself. Maria Elena Moretti was everything to him. After losing his first wife in childbirth, Lorenzo had sworn to protect this little girl from every danger the world could throw at her. He built walls around their mansion. He hired the best security money could buy. He made sure no enemy could ever touch her. What he never imagined was that the greatest threat would come from inside those walls. Isabella Moretti, his second wife, had swept into their lives 3 years ago like a hurricane wrapped in silk. She was stunning, sophisticated, and seemed to adore Maria Elena from the very first day they met. Lorenzo watched his broken daughter smile again, heard her laugh echo through the empty halls of their home. Isabella had seemed like a miracle, a second chance at happiness for both of them. But miracles, Lorenzo was about to learn, sometimes come with a price darker than any deal he'd ever made on the streets. The maid who called him that day was Rosa Delacroix. She'd worked for the Moretti family for 6 years, watching Maria Elena grow from a toddler into a bright, curious child. Rosa had seen everything in this house: the late-night phone calls, the mysterious visitors, the briefcases full of cash that came and went like shadows. But she'd never seen anything that scared her more than what happened behind closed doors when Lorenzo left for work. It started small. Isabella would speak sharply to Maria Elena when Lorenzo wasn't around. She'd criticize the child's manners, her appearance, her innocent questions. Rosa noticed how Maria Elena would flinch when Isabella entered a room, how the little girl's laughter became quieter, more cautious. Then Isabella began making rules. No running in the house, no loud voices, no tears when Daddy left for business trips. Maria Elena was to be seen and not heard, perfect and silent like a porcelain doll on a shelf. Rosa tried to intervene, gently suggesting that 8-year-old children needed room to play, to explore, to simply be children. Isabella's response was swift and cold. "Rosa, you're here to clean and cook, not to parent. Stay in your lane." The warning was clear, but Rosa couldn't ignore what she was witnessing. Maria Elena was changing. The bright, curious child was becoming withdrawn, nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder for Isabella's approval. Rosa started documenting everything. She took photos of Maria Elena's bruised wrists after Isabella grabbed her too roughly. She recorded conversations where Isabella called the child worthless, stupid, a burden on Lorenzo's success. But every time Rosa tried to bring her concerns to Lorenzo, Isabella was there first, with explanations that sounded perfectly reasonable. Maria Elena was going through a difficult phase. She was testing boundaries. She needed more structure, more discipline. Lorenzo, exhausted from managing his empire and still grieving his first wife, wanted to believe that Isabella had everything under control at home. He trusted his new wife completely, grateful that she'd taken on the challenge of raising another woman's child. What Lorenzo didn't know was that Isabella had married him not for love, but for power. She wanted to be the queen of his empire, the only woman who mattered in his world. And Maria Elena, sweet, innocent Maria Elena, was the one obstacle standing between Isabella and complete control over Lorenzo's heart. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in November. Lorenzo was across town, meeting with his lieutenants about a territorial dispute that threatened to explode into open warfare. His phone was on silent, his attention completely focused on strategies and contingencies. Meanwhile, at home, Maria Elena had made a mistake that would change everything. She'd been working on a school project about family trees, carefully drawing pictures of her parents and grandparents with colored pencils. When she reached for the red crayon to color her late mother's dress, her small hand knocked over a glass of water. The water spilled across Isabella's antique mahogany coffee table, seeping into the wood, leaving a stain that couldn't be ignored. Maria Elena stared at the damage in horror, knowing immediately that Isabella would be furious. She grabbed paper towels, desperately trying to clean up the mess, but the water had already soaked deep into the expensive wood. Isabella found her there, on her knees, scrubbing frantically at the stain with tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," Maria Elena whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mama Isabella. It was an accident. I didn't mean to." For a moment, Isabella said nothing. She stood perfectly still, her manicured hands clenched into fists, her perfectly made-up face twisted with rage that had been building for months. Then she exploded. "You stupid, clumsy little brat!" Isabella's voice cut through the mansion like a blade. "This table cost more than most people make in a year, and you've ruined it with your carelessness." Maria Elena cowered, still clutching the soggy paper towels. "Please, I'll fix it. I'll use my allowance money. Your allowance?" Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think your pathetic allowance could pay for this? You think anything you have could fix what you've destroyed?" Rosa heard the shouting from the kitchen and came running, but she stopped in the doorway, frozen by the venom in Isabella's voice. "You're just like your mother," Isabella continued, her words designed to cut deep. "Weak, worthless, a constant disappointment to everyone around you." Maria Elena's face crumpled at the mention of her mother. "Don't talk about my mama like that." "Your mama?" Isabella stepped closer, towering over the small girl. "Your mama is dead, Maria Elena. Dead and gone. And do you know why? Because even God couldn't stand having someone so pathetic in this world." That was when Rosa knew she had to act. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed Lorenzo's number. The meeting, the territorial disputes, the empire, none of it mattered more than protecting this child. But Lorenzo's phone was still on silent. The call went to voicemail. Rosa tried again and again. Each time she watched Isabella's rage escalate, watched Maria Elena shrink further into herself, becoming smaller and more broken with each cruel word. Finally, on the fourth try, Lorenzo answered. "Boss, please, something terrible is happening at home." Lorenzo's blood turned to ice. Rosa's voice was barely a whisper, but he could hear Isabella screaming in the background, and underneath it all, the sound that would haunt him forever. His daughter's broken sobs. "I'm coming," Lorenzo said, already moving toward the door. His lieutenants looked up in surprise as their boss abandoned the meeting mid-sentence. But one look at his face told them not to ask questions. The drive home felt like an eternity. Lorenzo's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing through possibilities. Had enemies found his home? Was Maria Elena hurt? Sick? The not knowing was eating him alive, but nothing could have prepared him for the truth. When Lorenzo burst through the front doors, the silence hit him like a physical blow. The mansion that was usually filled with Maria Elena's laughter and music from her piano lessons was eerily quiet. Even the staff seemed to have vanished, leaving only an oppressive emptiness that made his skin crawl. Rosa appeared at his side immediately, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Sir, I tried to stop her. I tried to call you sooner, but she wouldn't let me near the phone." "Where is she?" Lorenzo's voice was deadly calm, the same tone he used before ordering executions. Rosa pointed toward the main parlor, her hand shaking. "She's been in there for an hour. I've never seen anything like it, sir. Never." Lorenzo moved through his own home like a predator stalking prey. Each step brought him closer to sounds that made his heart break and his blood boil simultaneously. Isabella's voice, sharp and cruel. Maria Elena's quiet whimpers, the sound of something being thrown against a wall. He reached the parlor doorway and stopped. The scene before him was worse than any nightmare he'd ever imagined. Isabella stood in the center of the room, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her elegant dress wrinkled. She was holding one of Maria Elena's school notebooks, pages torn and scattered across the antique Persian rug like confetti. Maria Elena was pressed against the far wall, her small body trembling, her school uniform stained with what looked like spilled juice. Her dark eyes, so much like her late mother's, were wide with terror and confusion. "Maybe this will teach you to be more careful with other people's belongings," Isabella was saying, her voice cold as winter steel. "Maybe next time you'll think before you act like the spoiled little princess you think you are." Lorenzo watched in horror as Isabella grabbed another notebook from Maria Elena's backpack and began tearing out pages methodically, deliberately, her eyes never leaving his daughter's face. "Please, Mama Isabella," Maria Elena whispered. "Those are my drawings for Papa. I made them special for when he comes home." "Your Papa?" Isabella's laugh was like breaking glass. "Your Papa doesn't have time for your childish scribbles. He has important work to do, real responsibilities. Not like you, always demanding attention, always making messes, always reminding him of things he's trying to forget." The words hit Lorenzo like physical blows. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't even anger. This was systematic, calculated cruelty designed to break his daughter's spirit. Maria Elena's lip quivered. "I just wanted to make him something pretty. I wanted to show him I love him." "Love?" Isabella stepped closer, towering over the small girl. "You think drawing pretty pictures is love? You think being a burden is love? Let me tell you what love really is, you selfish little creature." Isabella raised her hand, and Lorenzo saw his daughter flinch, preparing for a blow that had clearly happened before. That's when something inside Lorenzo Moretti snapped. He'd killed men for less than laying a finger on someone he cared about. He'd burned down buildings for simple disrespect. He'd destroyed entire families for minor slights against his business. But this woman, this monster wearing his wife's face, had been torturing his child for months. In his own home, under his own roof, while he worked to build an empire he thought would protect them both. Lorenzo stepped into the room with the silence of death itself. Isabella spun around, her face immediately transforming from cruel predator to surprised victim. "Lorenzo, thank goodness you're home. Maria Elena has been impossible today. She destroyed my antique table, and when I tried to discipline her, she became hysterical." But Lorenzo wasn't looking at Isabella. His eyes were fixed on his daughter, taking in every detail with the sharp attention that had kept him alive in the criminal underworld for 20 years. The fingerprint bruises on Maria Elena's wrists, the way she kept her eyes down, afraid to make eye contact, the tremor in her small hands, the careful way she held herself, like someone expecting pain. These weren't the signs of a child who'd been disciplined once today. These were the signs of a child who'd been living in fear. "Papa." Maria Elena's voice was barely audible, hope and terror warring in that single word. Lorenzo knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Hello, Princess. I'm here now." Maria Elena's carefully controlled composure crumbled. She ran to him, throwing her small arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder with the kind of desperate relief that comes after months of holding everything inside. "I missed you so much, Papa. I tried to be good. I tried so hard to be good." Lorenzo held his daughter, feeling her tiny body shake against his chest, and something fundamental shifted inside him. The cold calculation that ruled his business life merged with the protective fury that lived in his heart. When he looked up at Isabella, she saw her own death in his eyes. "Rosa," Lorenzo said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Take Maria Elena to the kitchen. Make her some hot chocolate. Stay with her." Isabella's mask was slipping now, revealing glimpses of the monster underneath. "Lorenzo, you don't understand what happened. She's been acting out all day, and I was simply trying to maintain some order in this house while you were quiet." The word cut through the air like a blade. Isabella's mouth snapped shut. In all their years of marriage, she'd never heard that tone directed at her. Lorenzo stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Maria Elena, go with Rosa now. Papa needs to have a conversation with Isabella." As Rosa led, his daughter from the room, Maria Elena looked back once, her eyes wide with worry. "Papa, please don't be mad at me about the table. It was an accident. I promise it was an accident." The innocence in her voice, the genuine fear that she was still somehow to blame, nearly broke Lorenzo's heart completely. "You did nothing wrong, Princess. Nothing at all." When the door closed behind them, Lorenzo turned his full attention to the woman who'd been systematically destroying his child's soul. Isabella straightened her shoulders, clearly preparing to defend herself, to manipulate and charm her way out of trouble the way she always had before. But she'd never seen Lorenzo Moretti when someone had hurt his family. She'd never experienced the cold, calculating fury that had made him one of the most feared men in the city. "Sit down," Lorenzo said quietly. Isabella remained standing, lifting her chin defiantly. "I won't be ordered around in my own home by someone who's never here to see what really goes on." Lorenzo's smile was the same one his enemies saw in their final moments. "Your home?" Isabella's confidence wavered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered, smoothing down her designer dress with practiced grace. "Of course it's my home, Lorenzo. I've been taking care of everything while you've been playing gangster in the streets." The words hung in the air like poison. Lorenzo had heard men insult his business, his methods, his reputation, but no one, absolutely no one, had ever dismissed what he did as playing. "Playing?" Lorenzo's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than any shout. "You think what I do is playing?" Isabella rolled her eyes, a gesture so casual and dismissive that it revealed just how little she truly understood about the man she'd married. "All this drama, all these meetings and phone calls about territory and respect. Meanwhile, I'm here dealing with your daughter's constant neediness, her tantrums, her inability to behave like a proper young lady. My daughter." Lorenzo repeated the words slowly, tasting each syllable. "Tell me, Isabella, what exactly have you been teaching my daughter about being a proper young lady? Structure, discipline, manners?" Isabella lifted her chin higher, things her real mother clearly never bothered with before she died. The mention of his first wife was the final thread holding Lorenzo's restraint in place. He'd loved Elena Moretti with a passion that had consumed him, and when cancer took her, it had nearly destroyed him. Maria Elena was all he had left of that love, that life, that happiness. "What did you just say about my wife?" Isabella's eyes flashed with something ugly and triumphant. "Your dead wife, Lorenzo. The perfect saint you're always mourning. Well, let me tell you something about your precious Elena. She spoiled that child rotten. No boundaries, no consequences, just endless coddling. That's why Maria Elena is such a handful now." Lorenzo walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the garden where Maria Elena used to play with her mother. His voice, when he spoke, was conversational, almost friendly. Rosa has been with this family for 6 years. She loved Elena. She loves Maria Elena. Do you know what Rosa told me on the phone today? Isabella shifted uncomfortably. Rosa is just a maid. She doesn't understand the complexities of raising a child properly. Rosa told me that my daughter has bruises on her wrists. Lorenzo turned around slowly. Fresh bruises, Isabella. From today. She was being defiant. She needed to be restrained before she hurt herself or broke something else. Rosa told me that Maria Elena hasn't eaten dinner in 3 days because you've been using food as punishment. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. Rosa told me that you've been making my 8-year-old daughter clean the entire mansion on her hands and knees as punishment for minor accidents. Isabella's facade was cracking now, revealing flashes of the cruelty underneath. She needs to understand that this house has standards, that she can't just run wild like some street child. Lorenzo nodded thoughtfully, as if he was considering her words. Then he walked to his desk and picked up a small silver picture frame. Inside was a photo of him and Maria Elena from last Christmas, both of them laughing as they built a snowman in the garden. Do you see this picture, Isabella? Do you see how happy my daughter looks? She was happy then because she didn't have proper guidance. Happiness without discipline is meaningless. When was the last time you saw my daughter laugh? Really laugh. Not just polite smiles when I'm watching. Isabella opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. I can't remember either, Lorenzo said softly. My daughter used to sing while she did her homework. She used to dance in the hallway when she thought no one was looking. She used to ask me 100 questions about everything she saw. When did she stop, Isabella? When did my bright, curious little girl become the frightened child I saw today? She's growing up. Children change. They become more serious, more. Children don't change from joy to terror overnight, unless someone teaches them to be afraid. Lorenzo set the picture down carefully, and someone has been teaching my daughter to be very, very afraid. Isabella's mask slipped completely now, revealing the calculating predator underneath. Your daughter was weak, Lorenzo. Soft. She needed to be hardened for the world she's going to inherit. Do you think the wives and daughters of your enemies are going to coddle her? Do you think real society is going to accept a crying, clinging child who can't handle the smallest criticism? So you decided to break her spirit to save it? I decided to make her strong. Like me. Like the woman you fell in love with. Lorenzo laughed, but there was no humor in it. The woman I fell in love with? You mean the mask you wore for 6 months while you hunted yourself a rich husband? The performance you gave while you studied my weaknesses and planned your takeover? Isabella's eyes narrowed. I gave you everything. I made this house perfect. I attended every business dinner, charmed every contact, supported every decision. I turned myself into exactly what you needed. What I needed was someone who would love my daughter. I tried to love her. But she's impossible, Lorenzo. She's weak and needy and constantly demanding attention. She reminds you of your dead wife, and that makes you blind to her faults. Someone had to be the adult in this situation. Lorenzo walked to another picture on the wall. This one showed Elena holding baby Maria Elena in the hospital, both of them glowing with happiness and love. You want to know what Elena was like? She was gentle, patient, kind. She could calm Maria Elena's worst nightmares with a simple song. She could turn a scraped knee into an adventure with a band-aid and a story. Exactly. Weak. No, Isabella, strong. It takes real strength to be gentle with something fragile. It takes courage to love someone more than yourself. It takes wisdom to guide without breaking. Lorenzo turned back to face her, and Isabella saw something in his eyes that made her step backward involuntarily. You know what takes no strength at all? Hurting a child? Terrorizing someone who trusts you? Using your size and power to crush someone who can't fight back? That's not strength, Isabella. That's cowardice. I was trying to help her. Everything I did was for her own good. Was calling her worthless for her own good? Was telling her that her father doesn't have time for her childish drawings for her own good? Was making her believe that her dead mother was weak and pathetic for her own good? Isabella's face flushed red. She needed to hear the truth. She needed to stop living in fantasies about her perfect dead mother and her perfect life before I came along. The truth? Lorenzo's voice rose for the first time. The truth is that Maria Elena's mother died protecting her. Elena refused chemotherapy that might have saved her life because it would have hurt the baby. She chose our daughter over herself, and she did it gladly. That's the legacy you've been trying to destroy. That's exactly the problem. You've turned that woman into a saint, and Maria Elena thinks she has to compete with a ghost. I was trying to free her from that impossible standard, by telling her that her mother was weak, by making her ashamed of the love Elena gave her, by convincing her that grief and memory are weaknesses to be crushed. Isabella straightened her shoulders, gathering the remnants of her composure. I did what needed to be done. If you can't see that, if you're too blinded by sentiment to appreciate the improvements I've made, then perhaps we need to reconsider this entire arrangement. The threat hung in the air between them. Isabella had played this card before, during smaller arguments, using Lorenzo's fear of losing another wife to manipulate him into compliance. It had always worked. But Lorenzo wasn't the same man who had married her 3 years ago. The man who had married Isabella was broken, desperate, clinging to anything that promised to fill the emptiness in his life. The man standing before her now had remembered what he was fighting for. Reconsider our arrangement. Lorenzo's smile was cold as winter. By all means, let's do that. He walked to his desk and opened the top drawer, pulling out a manila folder thick with documents. Isabella watched, confused as he spread the papers across the desk surface. What are those? Bank records, phone logs, security footage from the house, witness statements. Lorenzo looked up at her with eyes like steel. Did you really think I built an empire by trusting people blindly, Isabella? Did you think I survived 20 years in this business by ignoring threats just because they wore pretty faces? Isabella's confidence flickered. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I've been investigating you for the past 6 months. Ever since I noticed that my happy daughter was becoming a nervous wreck. Ever since I started seeing fear in her eyes instead of love when she looked at the woman who was supposed to be her new mother. The color drained from Isabella's face. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting my family. Something I should have done from the beginning. Lorenzo picked up one of the documents. For instance, did you know that every conversation in this house is recorded? Including the ones you've had with Maria Elena when you thought no one was listening? Isabella's hands began to shake. That's illegal. You can't record private conversations without consent. I can record anything that happens in my own home. And lucky for me, I have hours and hours of footage showing exactly what kind of mother you've been to my daughter. Lorenzo pressed a button on his desk, and suddenly Isabella's voice filled the room through hidden speakers. Stop sniveling, you pathetic little brat. Your father doesn't have time for your tears. That notebook is garbage, just like everything else you create. Your mother is dead because even God couldn't stand having someone so worthless alive. Isabella's own words played back to her, each cruel phrase hanging in the air like an accusation. She watched her carefully constructed world crumble as Lorenzo's face grew darker with each recording. Turn it off, she whispered. Why? This is what you wanted, isn't it? The truth? Your version of strength and discipline and proper child-rearing? I said turn it off. No. Lorenzo's voice cut through her protests like a blade. You're going to listen to every word. You're going to hear what I've been hearing for months through these recordings. You're going to understand exactly what you've done to my child. The recordings continued, each one more damning than the last. Isabella's voice, cold and calculating, systematically destroying an 8-year-old girl's self-worth. The sound of Maria Elena crying. The sound of things being thrown. The sound of a child begging for mercy that never came. When the playback finally ended, the silence in the room was deafening. 6 months, Lorenzo said quietly. 6 months of documented evidence showing that you've been psychologically torturing my daughter. 6 months of proof that you're not just a bad stepmother, Isabella. You're a predator who targeted a grieving family. Isabella's last shred of composure shattered. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone like you? Always wondering if this will be the day you don't come home? Always having to be perfect? Always having to smile and pretend everything is normal while you're out there doing God knows what? So you took it out on an innocent child? She was in the way. Everything was about Maria Elena. Your schedule, your priorities, your affection. I was supposed to be your wife, but I felt like a stranger in my own home because every decision revolved around what was best for your precious daughter. Lorenzo stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time the monster he'd brought into his home. She's a child, Isabella. An 8-year-old child who lost her mother and needed love and stability, not competition for her father's attention. I needed love and stability too. But you were so busy being the perfect grieving widower and devoted father that you forgot you had a wife who needed you. So your solution was to hurt my daughter until she stopped needing me? Isabella's face twisted with ugly honesty. My solution was to make her strong enough to handle the real world, to teach her that she can't always be daddy's little princess, to prepare her for a life where she won't always be the center of everyone's universe. By telling her she was worthless? By making her believe her father didn't love her anymore? By destroying every happy memory she had of her mother? By teaching her that love has to be earned, that respect has to be maintained, that the world doesn't owe her anything just because she's Lorenzo Moretti's daughter. Lorenzo walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of Isabella, close enough that she could see the fury burning in his dark eyes. Let me tell you something about my daughter, Isabella. Maria Elena doesn't need to earn my love. She has it completely, unconditionally, forever, no matter what. That's what real love looks like. Not the transactional, manipulative game you've been playing. That's not how the world works, Lorenzo. That kind of unconditional love makes children weak and entitled. That kind of unconditional love gives children the strength to face anything the world throws at them, because they know they have a safe place to come home to. You tried to take that away from her. Isabella lifted her chin one last time, summoning the arrogance that had carried her this far. I tried to make her worthy of being your daughter. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Lorenzo's face went completely still, and when he spoke, his voice carried the cold finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Get out of my house. Isabella's face went white as the reality of her situation finally hit her. The power, the luxury, the status she'd fought so hard to obtain, all of it was slipping through her fingers like sand. Lorenzo, please. We can work this out. I can change. I can be better. But Lorenzo was already walking toward the door. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings. Rosa will supervise to make sure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. After that, you're never setting foot in this house again. You can't just throw me out. I'm your wife. I have rights. Lorenzo paused at the doorway, not bothering to turn around. Check the prenuptial agreement you signed, Isabella. The one that becomes null and void if you harm my daughter in any way. My lawyers made sure of that clause. As the door closed behind him, Isabella collapsed into a chair, finally understanding that she'd lost everything. The game she thought she was playing had rules she never knew existed. Lorenzo found Maria Elena in the kitchen with Rosa, quietly sipping hot chocolate. When she saw her father, her eyes lit up with a hope that broke his heart. Papa, is everything okay now? Lorenzo knelt beside her chair and took her small hands in his. Everything is going to be perfect, Princess. Isabella is leaving, and it's just going to be you, me, and Rosa from now on. Would you like that? For the first time in months, Maria Elena's smile was genuine and bright. Really, Papa? Just us? Just us. Forever and always. 6 months later, the Moretti mansion was filled with laughter again. Maria Elena had returned to her old self, curious, joyful, and secure in her father's love. Lorenzo had restructured his business to spend more time at home, realizing that no empire was worth more than his daughter's happiness. And sometimes, late at night, he would thank Rosa for that brave phone call that saved them both. The moral of this story is simple. Sometimes the greatest threats come from those we trust most. But when love is real, when family matters more than anything else, the truth will always find a way to surface.